I am Reed. I am 27, just an average dude. IV made tons of money mistakes in my 20s, and now I want to share everything I've learned to help you take control of your finances and your life. All right, man, let me just get straight into it. I've been watching the housing market like a hawk for the past few months, and honestly, what I am seeing is kind of wild, not in a good way. In a way that makes me feel for anyone in their 20s trying to figure out where they were supposed to live without going broke. So let me walk you through what's actually happening right now. No agenda, no script, just me sitting here and telling you what I am finding. First off, we got to talk about negative equity. Apparently, 1.1 million American homes are now in negative equity. That's up 15% in just 1 year. If you've never heard that term before, let me break it down real simple. Negative equity means you owe more on your house than what the house is actually worth. So imagine you bought a place for 400 grand, and now the market says it's only worth 370. You still owe 390 on your mortgage. You underwater. That's negative equity. It sounds like a finance nerd term, but really it's just a scary situation for a lot of regular people. Now, here's the thing that gets me. A lot of folks who bought their homes back in 2022, 2023, or 2024, they locked in a low interest rate. Maybe 3%, maybe 4%. So their monthly payment is manageable, they refine. But if they try to sell today, the buyer who walks in is looking at a 6.5% interest rate. That means that same house suddenly costs way more per month for the new buyer. So the buyer says, hey, I can afford that monthly payment unless the price drops. And the seller says, well, I can lower the price because I need to break even after paying 6% in commissions and closing costs. So the seller is stuck. If they do sell, they lose their equity. They might even have to bring cash to the table just to close the deal. Let me give you some real numbers because I love data like this. In California, the average negative equity is 25 grand per HOME. Nevada is 16 grand. Arizona, 24 grand. Texas, 19 grand. And then you got Wyoming just sitting there with 23 grand in positive equity, like they reliving in a different universe. It's wild. So basically, if someone absolutely has to sell right now because they lost their job or they removing or they can't afford the payments anymore, they're going to take a loss. And that is a scary position to be in. Now, let me tell you about the buyer sentiment, because this is where it gets really personal for us younger folks. 67% of us adults say it's a bad time to buy a home. Only 29% say it's a good time. But check this out. Among young adults aged 18 to 34, a whopping 77% say it's a bad time to buy. Compare that to 63% of people aged 35 to 54 and 64% of people 55 and older. So the people who are supposed to be entering the housing market for the first time are the most pessimistic. And honestly, I don't blame them one bit. I remember being 22 years old and thinking about buying a house one day, but I had no savings, no credit score, no clue what I was doing. I was just trying to survive month to month. And now I look at what today S22-year-old is dealing with. Prices are still high, interest rates are high, wages haven't kept up, and the cost of everything from groceries to rent keeps climbing. It feels like the system is stacked against you, and honestly, in some ways it is. Here's another stat that stopped me in my tracks. There are now 46% more home sellers than buyers. That's the biggest gap since Redfin started collecting data in 2013. Back in 2022, it was the complete opposite. There were 36% more buyers than sellers, so the whole dynamic has flipped. More people want to sell, but there aren't enough buyers to absorb all those listings. That usually means prices have to come down. But the tricky part is sellers don't want to lower their prices because they already barely breaking even or losing money. Now here's a weird twist. Pending home sales actually rose 7.7% year over year and hit the highest level since September 2022. So on the surface, it looks like things are picking up, but I think a lot of that is pent-up demand from people who saw mortgage rates dip a little bit earlier this year and thought, oh, finally I can afford to buy. Then the Middle East stuff happened and rates shot back up, so I am curious to see what the numbers look like in another month or two. I wouldn't be surprised if that spike fades. Also check this out. The median sales price for a new single-family home dropped $21,600 month over month in March. That's a 5.3% drop to the lowest level since July 2021. And when you adjust for inflation, the median real home price fell 6.3% month over month to the lowest since 2014. So prices are coming down, but they still high relative to incomes. And the income needed to buy a typical U.S. home has increased 79% in just the last 6 years. You now need to make 93 grand a year to finance the average home in America. That is insane. Let me stop here and tell you my personal take, because I think it matters. I grew up in a regular family, no trust fund, no inheritance, nobody handed me anything. I had to learn this stuff the hard way. I remember being in my early 20s and feeling completely lost about money. I was spending everything I earned on dumb stuff, eating out, buying clothes I didn't need. I had no savings, no plan, no clue. Then one day it hit me that I was just drifting through life, and if I didn't change, nothing would get better on its own. So I started reading about personal finance, I watched videos, I read blogs, I talked to people who were ahead of me, And I slowly turned things around. I paid off my debt. I built an emergency fund. I started saving consistently. And now I am in a place where I can look at the housing market and not panic because I know I have options. But be real with you. Even with everything I've earned, buying a house right now still feels risky. The numbers don't lie. Negative equity is rising, buyer sentiment is terrible, and the people who are actually buying right now are not the average person here. That's what I mean. I've been tracking real estate in Las Vegas, California, and Florida. I literally have Zillow alerts set up and I check prices every day. That's kind of my weird hobby. And what I am seeing is a super strange pattern. All of a sudden, there's an influx of buyers in certain price ranges, but they not buying 300 grand starter homes. They buying $5 million properties in cash. And I kept asking myself, where are these buyers coming from? Then it clicked, the stock market has been on an absolute tear. The S&P 500 has hit all-time highs. People who are heavily invested in stocks are sitting on massive gains, so they retrimming some of those gains and throwing them into real estate. They don't care about a 6.5% interest rate because they repaying cash or putting down 50% or whatever. They have so much money from Nvidia and Apple and whatever else that buying $1 million house feels like pocket change to them, but for the average person, the person making 60 grand a year trying to buy their first home, that person is getting squeezed from every direction. Mortgage rates are high, home prices are still elevated, and inflation is eating away at their paycheck. So we end up with this weird bifurcated market where the luxury segment is booming and the affordable segment is struggling. Check this out. According to Charles Schwab, the stock market is either very expensive or expensive relative to past performance across every single metric they track. That's pretty remarkable. And the PE ratio is currently at 38, which is the second highest reading in history, only surpassed by the dot-com peak of 44.2. Now, some people say that PE ratios are higher now because the economy is different. We have global markets and internet companies and AI that didn't exist 30 years ago. So maybe this is the new normal. Maybe we just have to accept that stocks will always be expensive from now on. But here's the thing. If you a young person who doesn't have a ton of money invested in the stock market, you are missing out on those gains. And that means you also missing out on the ability to buy a house with cash or even a big down payment. So the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider. The people who already have money are making more money, and everyone else is falling further behind. I saw a chart recently that showed baby boomers are dominating the housing market as the largest share of both buyers and sellers. That makes sense because they have the most wealth. They've been investing for decades. They own homes that have appreciated significantly, so they can sell their current home, take that equity, and buy something else. Meanwhile, Gen Z and younger millennials are stuck renting or living with their parents trying to save up for a down payment that keeps moving further out of reach. If you in your 20s and you feel like this is unfair, you not wrong. It is unfair. But here's what I've learned. Complaining about it doesn't change anything. You have to adapt. You have to figure out what you can control and work on that. I'm not saying I have all the answers because I don't. I am just a 27-year-old guy who made a bunch of mistakes and is trying to do better. But I will tell you what I am doing right now to navigate this crazy market. First, I am staying liquid. I keep a solid emergency fund and a high-yield savings account. That way, if an opportunity comes up or if things go south, I have options. Second, I am keeping my debt low. I don't carry credit card balances. I don't have a car payment. I live well below my means. This gives me flexibility. Third, I am investing consistently, even if it's a small amount every month. I'm not trying to time the market. I just put money in and let compound interest do its thing. Fourth, I am staying informed. I read about the housing market and the economy every day. Knowledge is power. Now let me talk about travel for a second, because this connects to the economy in a way most people don't realize. Travel is one of the first things people cut back on when money gets tight, and it's one of the first things they start spending on again when they feel confident. So the travel industry is actually a pretty good barometer of how people are feeling about their financial situation. I've seen what happened to Spirit Airlines recently, and that tells me people are pulling back on discretionary spending. When times get tough, the first things to go are vacations and eating out and entertainment. But here is an interesting angle. Even when people are cutting back on travel, they still want to travel. They just want to do it smarter. They want to find the best deals. They want to know where to stay and what's worth spending money on. And that's actually a skill you can develop. If you're good at planning trips and finding deals, you can turn that into a side hustle. There are platforms out there that let you earn commissions for booking travel for other people. So if you're someone who loves researching itineraries and finding hidden gems, you might want to look into that. I've been traveling more in the last couple years, and I've learned a ton about what works and what doesn't. The more I do it, the more I realize that good travel planning is about knowing the details. It's not just about booking a hotel room. It's about knowing which neighborhood to stay in, which restaurants are actually worth the hype, and which attractions are overpriced tourist traps. Those are the things that make a trip memorable or disappointing. So if you have that skill, sleep on it. Anyway, back to the housing market, because that's really what I want to talk about today. Let me summarize what I think is actually going on. The market is splitting into two tracks. On one track, you have luxury homes in the millions of dollars being bought up by wealthy investors and stock market winners. They repay in cash or putting down huge down payments, and they don't care about interest rates. On the other track, you have average homes in the mid-range and lower range where buyers are struggling with affordability and sellers are struggling with negative equity. If you re a first-time buyer in your 20s, you are on the second track, and that track is not fun right now. But that doesn't mean you should give up. It means you need to be strategic. You need to save aggressively, improve your income, and wait for the right opportunity. You might not be able to buy a house this year or even next year, but you can put yourself in a position where when the market shifts, you be ready to act. Let me tell you a quick story from my own life. Back when I was 22, I was working a job that paid just enough to cover my bills. I had zero savings and I was carrying a couple thousand in credit card debt. I remember feeling like I would never get ahead. Every month was a struggle, but I decided I was tired of living that way. So I started making small changes. I cut my spending. I started tracking every dollar. I picked up a side gig. It took time, but eventually I paid off that debt and built a little cushion. Now, I'm not saying I am rich or anything because I'm not, but I am in a much better place than I was 5 years ago. And I know if I keep making smart decisions, I'll be okay. The same is true for you. You don't have to have everything figured out today. You just have to start making better choices one at a time. If you rewatching this and you feel overwhelmed, take a deep breath. You're not alone. A lot of people are struggling right now. The economy is weird, the housing market is confusing, and the news is full of scary headlines, but you can still build a good life for yourself. It might not happen as fast as you want, but it can happen. That's what I recommend you do if you're serious about getting your finances in order. First, get a clear picture of where you stand right now. Write down your income, your expenses, your debts, and your savings. Just knowing those numbers is powerful. Second, make a budget that works for you. I don't mean some complicated spreadsheet. I mean a simple plan for where your money goes each month. Third, start an emergency fund, even if it's just $500 at first. That little cushion can save you from a lot of stress. Fourth, start investing even a small amount on a regular basis. Consistency matters more than the amount. And fifth, keep learning, read books, watch videos, talk to people who are where you want to be. The more you know, the better decisions you make. I am not a financial advisor, and I'm not claiming to have all the answers. I am just a normal guy who's been through some stuff and wants to share what I've learned. The housing market is tough right now, but that doesn't mean you should give up on your goals. It just means you need to be smarter and more patient than the average person. All right, man, I think I've said enough for today. I hope this was helpful, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What are you seeing in your city or town? Are you thinking about buying a house, or are you waiting it out? Drop a comment and let me know. I'll do my best to read and reply to as many as I can. And hey, if you found this useful, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Till next time, peace.